Here we go. We're here with Andy and Gerard from Open. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me on the, perhaps not quite the launch, but the release, shall we say, into the wild of the new Open Upper concept.
Thanks for having us.
And we're going to talk through sort of a little bit about this bike and a little bit about using it as a roadmap for you guys to look at the next 5 years of gravel. So October the 4th, I think, in Amsterdam was the first time this bike was shown off. And now here we are 6 months later with frames shipping in about a week's time, I think. The end of March. Is that 6 months from show to shipping? Is that pretty standard?
No, and I hope it never becomes the standard either. I mean, this is the good and the bad of having a company where you can do whatever you want to do. So, the good thing is that there's no pressure for us in the sense that if we launch and then we come across something that we want to still improve a bit, then we can. But of course, it makes it sometimes hard to get the cutoff and really start shipping. But so it's been a frustrating 6 months, that's for sure. But I think that the end result is better for it, and so.
And how much of this do you think is due to, because you guys have brought production out of Asia and back to Portugal? You've partnered with, is it Carbon Team?
Mm-hmm, correct.
And how much of that is a symptom of sort of your first go round with this sort of very new, very sort of technologically advanced, from what I understand, production process?
No, I mean, the buck stops with us. So, whatever it is, it's us. It has nothing to do with our suppliers in that sense. So, of course, sometimes there are some problems with, with any part, right? Whether it's a frame or a fork or a handlebar. But, in the end, we're responsible for, at least for when things go bad.
I'm not meaning to imply someone's at fault here. I'm simply saying, because it's obviously probably a smaller scale, almost bespoke operation.
But they're very responsive, and they're quite. I mean, small is not necessarily slow, right? Small also means that you often get a lot of attention, and you can talk directly to the people who make things happen. So no, I think the collaboration with Carbon Team is very good, and we're looking forward to many years to come.
Great. So let's talk about this new bike. The first thing that struck me was 650B. The industry's love affair with it seems to have lasted exactly one generation, and very few people are building in 650B compliance anymore, including you guys. What's happened there?
Yeah, I certainly have not fallen out of love with 650B. I love 650B. I think it is in some cases, definitely the right choice. I think the audience has fallen out of love with 650B. And then, of course, at some point, the industry cannot do, there's no point building them if people aren't buying them, right? At some point, the warehouse is full, and then you have to stop. So, the reality is that consumers, even those who would be better off in 650B, prefer to ride 700C. And I think we've done all we could to educate people on when 650B makes sense. And certainly there's a group of people who still appreciate that, but that group has become very, very small.
Wow. So despite your best efforts?
I mean, yeah, you could say that, but I mean, in the end, the customer decides, right? And if they think in their situation, C is better and that's what they want to buy, and that's, that's the freedom of choice, right? So, and we might feel differently about that, as we do about many things, right? And some things you battle your customers on, so to speak, or try to convince them. And this is certainly one where we've spoken a lot about the benefits of CB and when and how, but in the end you also have to come to realization that on some things people decide otherwise. So that's, like I said, that's the freedom they have. And it's not like C makes a bad bike, right?
No.
It's just that in some cases we feel that 650 would be a better choice. And
particularly on things like small sizes, I understand 650B gives you quite a lot of options. I mean, I think the average height of women at the moment is 5'3" or 5'4". So perhaps on smaller sizes, the 650B, what would happen if I put a 650B?
I mean, right now, I think on all sizes, right? I mean, it's just, people are very focused on that number, right? Which is the rim diameter, which is irrelevant because you're not riding on the rim, right? Yeah. But any modern B gravel tire is bigger than any old school C road tire ever was, right? So 60B is already bigger than C from the past, except it sounds smaller. I think that's what it comes down to. People go, oh, I want 700C. I want, that's what I'm used to, or that's what I have on my mountain bike. And never mind the geometry and all these things are very different. Yeah, of course, it becomes a bigger issue on smaller frames where your toe clearance with your front wheel isn't as good as it is on bigger frames, of course. And so and especially now as you see that tires are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, the case for CB actually becomes stronger and stronger. But the reality is, people aren't.
The customer has spoken. Fair enough. If we look at the bike, I think it's a very classic, very, very beautiful looking bike. It's distinctly an open as well. It looks like an open. Two things that struck me when I first saw it was you and the Specialized Crux seem to be about the only gravel bikes not sort of dropping the seat stays. And perhaps the thing that Open was most famous for, the dropped chain stays, that those have gone as well. Can you talk us through those decisions?
Yes. I mean, certainly the bike industry is an industry of I don't know, somebody goes in a certain direction and then everybody sooner or later follows in that direction, right? So, of course, we had that with the drop chainstay that were introduced on the up, and then sort of the telltale of a gravel bike became, if it has a drop chainstay, it must be a gravel bike. But of course, in the end, we didn't drop the chainstay because we like the curve or anything like that. It's to achieve something, right? To achieve certain tire clearance. And so now in general, as we go to our new range of bikes, we're trying to segment a little bit more between the up and the wide and the mind. So while today there's still reasonable overlap between the up and the wide and where you would use those and what kind of customer uses those, we try to separate a little bit more and make the differences bigger. And so the upper category, is becoming a really fast, racy, type of frame, and with very good tire clearance, but with the tire clearance where with modern technology and matching modern cranks, we can do it with straight chainstays. You have to remember when the original up was launched, there weren't really any gravel group sets, so you were riding that with a road group set, with a very narrow chain line. And so if the chain line's narrow, the chain ring is closer to the center. And so there's not as much space between the tire and the chain ring to put this chain stay through, right? So now you have, even road cranks have gotten a little wider. And of course, gravel cranks are even wider. So the chain rings have moved out. And so there's more space between the chain ring and the tire to put a chain stay through. Okay. So you don't need to curve as much to get around all this stuff. It's just gotten less crowded at the bottom bracket. So you can put a straight chainstay through.
Okay, and of course, so there's curves chainstay.
We're going to bend this chainstay just for the look. When we don't need it anymore, then we'd rather have a straight one. Save some weight, increase the stiffness, etc.
So it was a workaround that's no longer needed because the componentry has sort of caught up.
Correct. Yeah.
Very interesting. And one by has that's obviously played a massive part. This bike is one by only?
No, it's one by. Well, I mean, the upper concept is one by only. Of course, we will make two by versions as well at some point. But the one by upper, the upper concept is one by only.
And electronic only.
Correct.
And electronic only. Okay, so this is really your best foot forward. This is really a statement of the foot. I forget how you phrase it. Sort of the reduced to the max, or.
Reduced to the max. Yeah, that's an old slogan from smart cars. Yes, when they were small and smart instead of big and ugly. But so I mean, the upper concept is really sort of to show that design direction. So it's really about the frame. So everything else is pared down to the max, as you say. So that's why it's one by only and electronic only. Of course, electronic only is not really any sort of limitation, since that upper customer is always going to have an electronic drivetrain anyway, right? So that's not really any limitation in what our customers would do with it, but it just allows us a little bit. And there's no cable going through the whole frame, you can do things a little different.
Will the coming versions of anything else be mechanical?
No, I think our customer is just an electronic customer now for the drivetrain.
No more mechanical.
And we can see that because we of course we have our showcase on our website where a lot of our customers upload their builds, and also other ways that we get information, so we can just see how people build our bikes, and that is overwhelmingly electronic. And of course, every year you move into the future, it becomes more so, right? As electronic group sets, go down in price, or the next tier down from from SRAM and Shimano become electronic. I mean, you look at SRAM particularly, right? I mean, they have 4 levels of electronic group sets, right? So none of our customers are looking for the 5th level from the top, to make a mechanical bike.
Very good. Suspension coming to gravel, or sort of darting around the edges for a while. Is this a suspension corrected frame? Is this something you thought about, care about, want to include, or is...
So we have nothing against suspension for the right application. For this bike, it wouldn't make any sense. But a suspension that you need on this bike, you get from the tires, and it has the tire clearance to put a big enough tire on to make that happen. And so it is extremely suspension incorrect. And I mean, of course, you can always put a suspension fork on, but it really isn't meant for that. And I think the whole discussion on suspension is a little bit off base, I think, in gravel. And, there are applications where suspension makes sense. But I think for most people, when they ride the bike, what has made gravel so popular as opposed to mountain bikes in a lot of regions is that that first 10 miles or 15 kilometers, are asphalt roads, because that's sort of where you live. Most people live in cities. And so you need to get to the trails, and nobody wants to do those 10 miles on a slow mountain bike. So that the gravel bike is fast and efficient is just very important. So suspension sort of plays against that. And then the other point is that also the people who make suspension products for gravel will tell you their products aren't really that great yet, because it is extremely difficult to make, for example, a suspension fork for gravel, right? I mean, you have very little travel, and, people are much more concerned about the weight, right? So now what you have is, with a gravel fork, if the bumps are big, the travel isn't big enough. If they're washboards, the fork doesn't react quickly enough. So you're hauling an extra kilogram of bike along with you. And there aren't really that many situations where the terrain is really doing that fork a favor. So maybe in the future, with different technologies and people working to improve these things, for sure that can change, right? The first mountain bike fork wasn't that great either, but it's much harder to make a good gravel fork than a good mountain bike fork.
Right. Very interesting. So maybe next release, 5 years time, if the technology has got to where you want it to, maybe we can talk again.
Well, we can always talk again.
We can always talk again. You mentioned weight as being a massive factor in suspension. The frame I've got here, it comes out at 845 grams. That's pretty impressively light for a gravel bike. I think only the Crux I found was sort of any lighter, and something sort of a comparable cost. 3T Extrema Italia comes out at a hair under 1,100 grams for the same size and roughly the same cost. How much of a factor was really getting this to be a lightweight bike important to you?
No factor at all, really. I mean, we never really focus on the weight, right? We want to achieve a lot of things on how the bike handles, and so the stiffness and, of course, the strength that you need in the frame. And then the weight is the result that comes out, right? Of course, we try to design the tube shapes and everything in a smart way so that you don't, just throw away the weight, right? But it's not really the goal. It's really the outcome. And of course, the frame in the end, although maybe in the side profile looks quite classic, let's say, but of course all the tubes are aerodynamically shaped, and on the head tube you can see it very clearly, obviously. And the other tubes you can see it a bit less. Also that was a goal: get the aerodynamics in while maintaining a fairly classic look, and also for aerodynamics we didn't really need more than that. And then the weight is nice, but if it had been 100 grams more, it would have been 100 grams more. Like, it's not like we would have changed anything on the frame to get those 100 grams out.
Very good. I see on your site you've effectively bifurcated the bike, sort of aerodynamics at the front and compliance at the back. Is that the sort of tenet of the design here?
Yeah, that is where those things make sense, right? I mean, the front end is most important for the aerodynamics, and the rear end is most important for comfort together with the fork. And so that's why we certainly have that split. Although also in the rear, where you can do something for aerodynamics, we do it like in the little shaping of seat stays, for example. And in the front, where we can add comfort, we do it as well, right? And on the front, particularly for the comfort, we offer, the two forks, right? So we offer an aero race fork, and we offer a comfort adventure fork. So you can still tune it there as a consumer.
Very good. Well, let's see if we can coax Andy into a few words. He's sitting there thinking we're not going to come to him. Mr. Kessler.
I have no idea about bikes, I'm just a stupid tailor.
He's got more miles on on the upper concept than I do. So
very good. I'm excited to ride it. This is your first foray into making cockpits and seat posts and headsets and everything like that. How's that been? And can we look forward to open as an aftermarket component manufacturer?
That's a question for sure. No, seriously, I mean, that's not a primary goal, but obviously this can happen, right? We would like to work together maybe with some small guys that, kind of share our technology. But I think, I mean, that's, I think you have to look at the bike as a whole thing, right? I mean, before we had a frame set and then we added components, and now it's everything made by us, which obviously there is a lot of connection points between the cockpit and the frame and everything. So I think that's also something, when you ride the bike, actually, you can feel a difference, right? I mean, as Gerard explained, I had more miles on this bike. Also, I have 2 broken ribs now. I'm also off the bike. But anyway, that's something you feel immediately that's always the question, when you have a new bike, what can you do better, right? And I think part of the ride feeling you get with the new upper, later on also with all other bikes, is really this integration of everything. And when I talk about integration, it's not that the cables are integrated, right? It's Gerard Vroomen over-engineered. We have 3 different fork brakes, for example, right? With at the end, we have 5 SKUs for one bike and 5 SKUs then for the bike that we have with the Adventure fork. We have 11 SKUs for the cockpit. And I think at the end, it's all one thing right now. It's just not just the frame as in the past, but it's the whole combination, which makes at the end a bike that rides totally great. So I think the goal was to make the perfect bike, as always. And I think we reached that. And no, we don't want to become Easton or Ritchie or whatever, right? But yes, I mean, it would be cool if you have 2, 3 smalls, whatever, titanium brands that adapt our system and make cool bike.
Very good. So it's proprietary for the upper concept, your cockpit.
Yeah. So I mean, one of the things that maybe a bit back, like whenever I ride a bike, I go, okay, these are the things I don't like, and then that will go into the next bike. That's sort of the idea, right? And with the up, that's been very difficult because we love the up, and we didn't really have these big things. We want to change that. But the one thing that sort of always irked me a little bit is that when we choose our crank, we can choose it by 2.5 millimeter length increments. When we set our seat height, we can also, set that to the millimeter. And then in our cockpit, the stem goes by centimeters. That's a little crazy, right? Like either these things are important for positioning or not. So I wanted to get this stem adjustability in smaller increments. And I also wanted to do that in a way that people can change that quite easily, maybe not on the fly, but they can through the season, or as things change, they can adjust that. So the goal was really to create a cockpit that would have more adjustability. And that, of course, meant we had to do the cockpit ourselves. And so in the end, the cockpit and the way the cockpit connects to the fork is, an integrated system that now allows you to adjust your stem with 5 millimeter increments. And so the same cockpit, can be adjusted over a total range of 15 millimeters. So in 4 steps, you can change the stem length to really dial it in exactly as you feel comfortable. And then also with a ton of different widths and everything, as Andy explained. So that's how we, have 11 SKUs and 44 different, in the end, cockpit dimension combinations.
I think he was tacitly saying you make his life very difficult. I think that's the real subtext.
Yeah, but I would have made it more difficult if I'd made 44 different handlebars. So now only four different lengths are in the same handlebar, which is easier for Andy, but it's also much easier for our customer. And it also means that the length adjustability of this handlebar and, of course, the height adjustability of the handlebar can be done without disconnecting the brake hoses, for example.
What is the maximum range of adjustability in each unit?
15 millimeters.
15 millimeters. Okay, so I can... Yeah. Okay, so...
Stem length and a half. So say you're normally, a 90 millimeter stem, then you get maybe now to 80 to 95. So you can go 5 millimeters up and 10 down, or, depending on which direction you think you would want to move, right? But you could get to 90, and then you could go all the way up to 105 if you think there's still some Pocaccia in you and you might have a future there.
And I think beside, I mean, obviously having the perfect fit, that's also a great value when you want to resell the bike. I mean, not that's the primary idea when you buy a bike that you resell it, right? Because our customers normally keep their bikes for like 7 or 10 years. But yeah, I mean, that's the biggest downside about integration is, you have this $1,000 cockpit that it's just what it is, right? And, if you get more flexible in your torso, you can adjust, and if you want to sell your bike and the other guy wants to have a 1 centimeter longer stem, he cannot adjust. So I think it's also, in terms of reselling a bike, it's quite an argument. Not that this is your primary argument, right?
Very interesting. Can we talk about, let's go back to European production a little bit. What have been the, obviously you're re-onshoring, as they say, production at a time of some, woes in the bicycle industry. How has that been and why now?
Well, it's not really a now, of course, right? I mean, we didn't decide yesterday to produce in Portugal. So when we made that decision, the bike industry was a lot different than it is today. It was also crazy, but it was crazy in the other direction. I mean, why now? Because we felt we wanted to do that. That's why, right? I mean, it's sort of, that's not the kind of conversation it is, but it's sort of, we looked a couple of years ago, at this world and thought, this world is not getting any nicer. We're lucky that we live in countries that are, relatively well organized. We get the vote, and those are fairly honest votes, and and we get to ride our bikes, which especially gravel bikes to us is really the ultimate sensation of freedom, right? And we thought, okay, you see things in the world you don't like, you can't necessarily make any real influence on it, but the small influence we have is that we own a company, right? And so we can put not only our own dollars, but also the company's dollars, where we believe in it. And so that's why we decided that, hey, if we ride in freedom, we also want to produce these bikes in freedom. And so that was really the main reason to reshore. And then,
I suppose that begs the question, when did you make this decision? When did you guys start thinking about this?
I mean, I've always liked producing close to where the bikes are dreamt up and where the bikes are used. Like I wanted to do this 30 years ago, with Cervelo, right? And we used to produce in like Cervelo started in Quebec, and we used to produce in Quebec. We've produced in Seattle, and of course, but there was this whole wave, especially when production went to carbon. The only places you could really produce carbon almost at some volume was in Asia. So then that all went offshore, but at Cervelo, we always said if we could produce locally for double the price, we would. And of course, with Cervelo, we had Project California, where we set up some production in California, which was definitely not double the price, but more like 10 times the price. And of course, also, at 3T, right? We brought production back to Italy. And so I've always been interested in it. And we were pretty good friends with the Bike Ahead people in Germany, who make all the crazy light parts and wheels.
Yeah, I love their wheels.
And so they are one of the founders, really, of the Carbon Team project in Portugal. So that sort of made us think, like, okay, here's a factory where really we can make very nice, technically very good bikes. Stiff, strong, light. This is the place where we can do this, and hopefully for a relatively reasonable price.
Well, let me ask you about the price. What is the delta? What is the difference between a made in Asia frame and a made in Portugal frame?
So for the unpainted frames, all the cost is a bit more than double. The painting is a real killer because it's very labor intensive. The carbon costs the same in Europe and in Asia, right? So labor is really the difference, and painting is a relatively
labor intensive
process, yeah. Right? On the carbon production, actually in Europe they can put less labor in. If you put a lot more focus on quality at the start, then you have less sanding and you have less finishing and all these things at the end. So you can save some labor. Still, overall, you save hours. In euros, it's still more expensive, but you can save some hours. But painting is painting. It's just a lot of labor. So when you look at the painted frames, it's closer to 3x, but on the unpainted frames, it's 2x. And we do a lot of unpainted frames, right? Because a lot of our customers want to do custom paint. So both
what percentage do you think you're sending out the door ready to paint?
A fairly good percentage. I think it will also go up. So It's not quite half, but yeah, maybe 30% or so.
That's amazing.
I mean, sorry, I say unpainted. It's either unpainted or custom painted, right? So we ship it out unpainted, but to the painter that we work with together with the customer to get it painted. But also there are customers who just get the unpainted frame and then they go to their own local, custom painter, and we don't really have any involvement. So those are the two versions.
I think that's what I'm doing. I found a painter here in the UK who's going to do something hopefully very, very special. Although I found that to be an utter nightmare. It turns out I'm incapable of making decisions. Anyway, there we go.
This is the problem. That's what I always say, like, only offer one color, because if you offer two, people want the third. Like, it's
Wow, I didn't realize I was so indecisive until I came to choose a paint scheme that would have to go in front of a cycling public and be judged. Anyway, there we go.
So you buy a bike and we make you feel bad right off the get-go.
Yeah, there we go. So Carbon Team are sort of quite secretive, I think, about their very advanced fabrication processes. Is there anything you can tell us that doesn't get them to put a hit out on you?
I didn't know they were so secretive, but maybe that makes everything tricky that I say. No, I mean, I think, I don't know. I mean, the process, I don't think the process is revolutionary, but the process are known processes and they just do them well. And they are, but they're very, very technology focused, I would say. So they really, they care a lot about everything that affects the performance. They don't care maybe as much on aesthetics, let's say, or in so they're very, you're like, oh no, that looks a little bit maybe it doesn't look quite so nice on the inside or this or that, and people are like, yeah, but it doesn't affect, there are also brands that focus very much on kind of finishes in a way that doesn't affect performance, right? So
Right.
not that there's anything wrong with that, but they are very, very performance oriented, let's say.
I have to say I like the sound of an outcome focused production outfit. That sounds to me sort of everything else we can cover with paint. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. No, I mean, in that sense, the finish is perfect. So there's actually very little prep for the painter to do the paint. So maybe I'm not doing a very good job of describing it, but they're really like, okay, we're doing these processes. Does this help the performance? Does this help the stiffness or strength?
Okay.
Yes. Okay, then we're really going to put a lot of effort into it. Is it just, does it really, it's more for show? Then there's like, okay, let's focus on something else.
Very good. Okay, well, so the next interesting bit, and I think it was something, Andy, you said to me a while ago, that the sort of coming sort of spectrum continuum of open bikes it's not about a road bike or a sort of light gravel bike or a heavy gravel bike now. You just want all the bikes to be seen on the same continuum, and you sort of make a choice based on effectively the tire size you want to ride. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, gravel is a very wide termination, right? So it's basically like every category, it's kind of wrong. There's a lot of stuff you can do with that bike, right? And it basically, I often think back, when I started mountain biking and doing downhill races with, rigid forks and aluminum frames that were super stiff. So that's a bike you can do really everything. I mean, we had the discussion before, do you want to have suspension forks? And I'm always a fan of the 80-20 rule, right? There is, it has to be a bike that in 80% of what you do, it feels better than in the rest of the 20%. And so I think, talking about gravel bikes is basically wrong, because it's much more, right? It's a bike you can do almost everything. If I could only have two bikes, it would be a gravel bike, and then it would be a mountain bike with 150 plus suspension. So I think it makes more sense going forward that you talk about tire clearance, because a lot of people use also the Mind to do gravel. I remember, I know Gerard for sure, but I remember when we brought out the Mind, the first test was in Grand Fonda magazine, and they went off-road with it, right? And they say, hey, you can really go off-road with that bike also. With good tire clearance, obviously, and also Gerard, he does it quite often. Martin, our tech guy, same thing. He uses that bike for easy gravel. So I think going forward, I think it makes much more sense that you talk about tire clearance, because there's a road bike that you can go off-road, or there's an off-road bike that you can go on the road, right? And that's also why I think in the future we will have a bigger segmentation between the upper and the wide, because often you can really see the customer coming from the road for the up and the upper, and the customer coming from mountain bike for the wide, right? And I think that's also one reason why you should not talk about gravel, because I think gravel is a bad termination. We talked a lot about that. I mean, theoretically, if it would not be a bad termination, also you would name it free ride, right? Because it's really, you can ride wherever you want with those bikes. It just depends what you want to ride.
I mean, it sort of begs the question, why is Gerard using a traditional road bike to ride gravel? What is the tire clearance, and can he not get his hands on a gravel bike? I know people at Specialized. I'm sure I can get hold of a gravel bike.
I've been asking Andy for a discount, and he just won't give me one.
He won't let you. What's the tire clearance on a Mind?
It depends on how official you go by the rules. But, like say 30. But what I put on the Mind was like a cyclocross tire.
Okay.
The cyclocross tire fits, so let's say that I think it was 33, 34.
Okay.
But now I have a GP5000 on that is the same size, right? Except it's smooth. So, I mean, in the Netherlands, the gravel isn't very difficult, and you're riding on a lot of asphalt roads to connect your gravel pieces, right? So, well, especially this side of the country, a little bit less when you go east. But so, I mean, what I've ridden in the Netherlands most is either a Mind or a wide, but not much of an up, strangely enough.
Interesting.
But I think it's also like with a good gravel tire, like good gravel tires are just really fast. So, I have a friend who visits me every year from Canada. And then, so this year is coming and we do 4 days of real gravel riding. And then we do the Amstel Gold touring ride, and he does just everything on the gravel bike. And he doesn't even change the tires. He's going to do 240 kilometers on his gravel tires on asphalt, right? So like, it's too much hassle to bring an extra set of tires even, and then the tires he has are good enough.
I'd say that's one of the things I am really looking forward to about the upper concept. I've got some 40mm Schwalbes there. I'll stick them on some Zip 353 NSWs. It'll be, I hope very, very quick on the road, very quick on light gravel. And if I need anything more, if I need that extra 4 or 5mm, then maybe I'll pick a gravel wheel. But I'm not sure this is going to be, I hate that phrase, but an N+1 killer, quiver killer. I'm, a real do-it-all bike. And I suppose there's benefit when you're paying for a premium bike.
But there's that, but there's also, I mean, just, you should just spend your time riding, right? Not changing wheels and tires and whatever. Yeah. So you just go out and ride. And the thing is, when you go on a road ride and you have those tires on and you see a little path, you go like, hey, why not, right? So, and I think that's for me, that's how it all started. That's how I used to ride, but on my road bike with 28mm tires, right? And then, which is great, except you get a lot of flats. So, but that's really that spirit of the freedom and everything that Andy also talks about is, that to me is the most fun in riding, is just riding on a bike that's always fast. And then when you no matter what you come across, you go like, yeah, no,
I can do that
right here, see where it leads.
Yeah, I love that 80-20, Andy. That's very...
Yeah, and it's also, for us, it's about the fun, right? So even that 20% where you're under-tired, and you're just really struggling, it's still fun. Yeah. Because you're riding in some crazy terrain where you go like, I really shouldn't be doing this with the tire. But, that's a lot of fun, right? Yeah. Whereas, and of course, this is the thing. Either the terrain is fun or you're going fast, right? But you don't want to get with this sort of mountain bike, which is then, not fun on the asphalt. And then, that short descent there, it was the optimal bike, but you're suffering through the other 80%.
Very good. So the Made in Asia frames, will they stay in your lineup? Will you start tapering those out?
Yeah, the funny thing is, obviously, now that we start kind of announcing the new models, a lot of people that have their upper frame since, sometimes even 7-8 years, right? They buy another one. But obviously, sooner or later, we're going to phase them out. But for this year, they will stay in the lineup because, as we were talking before, our goal is to produce in freedom, right? And so definitely for this year, we will still have frames available, but I mean, obviously also with changes in group sets, right, that are coming up and new standards, sooner or later, obviously we will phase them out.
Right.
But once again, it's not because we think it's something bad, but it's just like, yeah, I mean, it's some of those products are 10 years old, right? So,
Yeah, of course.
and they still write great. Yeah, as I said before, it's so funny, like now consumers are starting to panic and basically want to save, a second. They buy even some frames just to keep them, right? Not even building them up, but or just like one for their wife. So I think that's, by design, it's a very classic design. By performance, it's still one of the best performing bike out there. And yeah, let's be honest, not everybody is a fan of system integration, right? I mean, so yeah, those bikes will still be around, especially like the wide, right? Where a lot of people build them up with a mullet setup. So yeah, you will still see them around for, another year, but then sooner or later they will phase out.
Very good. Can you talk about what I guess will be the coming new wide, the coming new up, and presumably at some point a new mind as well? How will they be similar to this concept?
So if we keep the name, it's because we sort of keep that category. But like I was saying, the wide it will move a little bit more away from the up and upper, and with the mind, it's a little bit less so. I mean, that sort of stays more in its place, let's say. So, but those are still. The thing is, as happened with those 6 months before we're now shipping this one, like we never know until we're actually going into production. So we have so many concepts that we thought, oh, this is cool. And then we got really close and some of those cut molds and everything. And then we decided, no, we're not going to do it. We shelve it. So it's a very dangerous life as a frame in development at Open. Like your life could be over at any moment. So it's hard to say like, oh, the wide will be this or the mind will be that. So we're fully focused now on the the upper concept and on getting that shipped, and then certainly that direction, the upper concept or the up and upper direction, is the first direction that we're that we're now fully focused on. And
Gotcha. Without wishing to labor the point, can you talk about time scales at all without holding you to any of this, or do you not really want to?
I think your listeners would hold us to it. So
okay.
But we appreciate that you personally do not. But no, I mean, we really don't know until we really go into production. Like I said, we've so many times. I've never done that with any other company I've been involved in, but with Open, it's just, we might think we're close, and I call in and go like, I don't think this is quite right. And they go, okay, then we wait. But usually, and hopefully, normally we do that before we announce it.
We could say summer, but we don't say in which location, right?
Or which year, yeah.
No, which year or which location, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, right. It's always summer somewhere. Summer in Australia gives you to Christmas. Fantastic.
Yep, make some room.
Very good. The up and upper, I think, really did pretty much more than any other bike to sort of stabilize and sort of popularize this sort of very, very emerging gravel scene sort of almost 10 years ago. Have you felt the need to sort of almost reinvent the wheel here? Or is it a nice position to be in that there's nothing drastic here and that the segment is stabilized and it's sort of an evolution rather than a complete begin again? Or am I wrong?
It's for me, this has been a nightmare. Like the fact that the up really sort of defined that category of like a fast gravel bike. And I mean, I remember we launched that at Sea Otter, and people going like, oh, what is this, right? And why do we need this? And then I remember telling journalists like, in 10 years, 5 to 10 years, this will be as big as road bikes, and everybody thought that was crazy, right? And I mean, for some brands now, it really is bigger than their road bike sales, right?
Oh yeah, according to Strava, I believe this year the gravel sector grew 5 times 50%. It was 15%. So it's nearly 3 times faster than any other outdoor pursuit they tracked. It's huge.
Yeah, and so, but and we said back then, like we need other people to also make these gravel bikes, because we're not going to be the specialized or trackers of gravel bikes, right? We just want to be open.
So
for
What
4 days
does the
there
gravel
we
sector?
had, sorry.
Sorry, go on. I was going to
No,
say that
and so yeah, every day, right? We had like product managers coming from all these other, because CEO, there's sort of an industry meeting as well. So all these product managers were coming saying, you need to build this, you need to build this too. And it still took a long time, but yeah, when it did, and then everybody kept referring to like, oh, the Up started that, and now see all these other brands, dropping their chain stays and all these things. And yeah, I guess I put it on myself. I put a lot of pressure on myself that, okay, the next Up needs to be, another sort of quantum leap and define a new direction. But of course, I also realized eventually this is impossible. I mean, I think of, with Cervelo or 3T or Open or of all the bikes I've designed, the Up is by far my favorite, right? Because it wasn't just a new bike, but it was a new way of riding. Like so many customers who've come back to us saying, oh, I can't believe the places I'm riding now that are close to my home. I'd never seen them before, but with the Up, I finally get there. I get to those places. It has really completely changed how I ride. And I just came to the conclusion that it's very unlucky or unlikely that will happen again. I mean, that you're very fortunate that it's ever happened with something I designed. So while the Up and Upper, the new Up and Upper will never be as revolutionary as the original one. After 10 years, we did collect enough things that we go, okay, we can really do something different here. So I think the way that the cockpit works, the integration, the cockpit of the fork, the two different forks and how they will play out, the way the aero shaping is, but still keep the classic ride and the compliance and the comfort that the Up is known for so well. So all those things together, make me very excited about this one.
very good.
But not in the sense of like people go like, you're gonna ride this where you ride the old Up, but then better and still a little bit further and a little bit tougher terrain. But you're not going to completely change, where you ride.
So, Levy, on the back of that, if you sort of had this vision of where the gravel industry would be 10 years ago, where do you think it's going to be and what's it going to look like 5 to 10 years from now?
Well, I think so. In the past 10 years, I mean, there were sort of two things that happened. One is that, of course, the gravel category exploded. But the other thing that happened is road bikes started to look more and more like gravel bikes, right? When the road bike became a disc brake bike, then half the difference was gone. And then when the road bike got more tire clearance, that difference became even smaller, right? So now that's why we're now talking, like Andy said, about, okay, what's the tire clearance? Because that's really now the defining difference between that whole range of bikes. So I think, I don't know, but what I hope will happen is that really the market as a whole will realize that, the definition that we've been making in road and gravel is wrong. We should be looking at racing bikes. And if you race and if you're going to the Tour de France, congratulations, have fun there. But for almost all other people who actually buy their own bikes, those bikes don't make any sense. They don't pave the roads just because you're going to ride there on Sunday. They don't have a street sweeper that goes, on the roads where you go an hour before you get there, right? You ride in the real world. So you need bigger tires, you need more redundancy and avoiding flats and all these kind of things. So I hope that, we have brands who sponsor pro teams and make some bikes just for those guys and girls. But then on the other side, we have people, the vast majority of people in the world ride bikes that are made for that real world, which means, a gravelish sort of bike, which may have slick tires in it when you go on the easy stuff and, knobby tires in it when you ride more on the tough stuff. But I think that's where we'll go. And then, of course, what will inevitably also happen is when this gravel category, gravel, road, whatever you want to call it, that whole category becomes so big, then it starts to be sliced up again in all these subcategories, right? So now you get the suspension gravel bike, you get the racing gravel bike, you get the endurance gravel bike, you get, plus 5 more categories that we can't think of yet today, but somebody will. And some of those will make sense and stick, and some will thankfully disappear quickly again.
It's all a cycle. People talk about, gravel bikes being, akin to 80s rigid mountain bikes. And then we put suspension on them and turns out we're coming just back to where we started all over again. Very good.
I think maybe just to add to that, one important point is also road safety, right? That is getting more and more of an issue, and that makes you go also with a classic road bike on secondary roads, right? Or like easy gravel roads. And there definitely you need more comfort for that. And that's also kind of giving a focus on this non-competitive road bike, Tour de France style.
Let's see what should we talk about next. Done that. Comfort aero handling, we've done that, I think. Oh yeah, let's go back one a little bit. You talked a little bit about time at Cervelo and 3T. I think that's always sort of quite nice to sort of look back on sort of very accomplished careers for you both. What are the lessons you've learned from Cervelo, from 3T, from BMC, from Scott that have come to become a part of the fabric of Open?
Andy?
None. We try to make our life simpler, but we totally fail. No, seriously. I think the most important thing for both of us is that, we kind of learned that we are not classic managers, right? That, want to kind of manage people and grow the business every year by 30% and being far away from the product. I mean, I think we are both product guys. I mean, different approach, right? But yeah, we love what we do, right? And that's, I think, one of the main reasons why we success is that we build bags that we like ourselves, and we don't have a big marketing team that tells us what to do. And so I think when we talked about freedom, freedom in production, freedom in your head, that's definitely, I think, something we realized, right? That we are kind of doing really with zero compromises what we like to do. And sometimes, as we see it right now, I mean, the new product, it's in terms of complexity, it's 10 times more complex than our current lineup, right? And probably in every other company, people would have said, hey, this is a logistical nightmare, right? But we want to do it because we believe in it. And so I think freedom is probably the most important thing, that, we basically do what we like. And that's a lot of different things, right? I mean, most of them are kind of a standard right now. But when we started Open, we basically had a couple of core principles. And one was, not really sponsoring anybody, which is still kind of, still true. And that is not because we don't want to spend the money or because we don't want to spend the time, but, it really, the result of it, that everybody, I mean, like you, right? It's probably the first bike that you actually buy since a long time. And so that really gives the product credibility, because people really ride it because they like it. And it basically is the best marketing tool you can have, because it's not us saying, hey, we're the best, right? But it's our consumer that says, hey, that's the best bike I've ever ridden.
I'd be quite happy for you to change your position here, by the way, if you want to start sponsoring, a British cycling journalist in the UK.
I'm sorry, even Lenny Kravitz had to buy his bike. So, no, but seriously, I mean, that's an important thing for us. And the other thing is, having a strong community, which today everybody has. And so I think with Open, we can do really what we like to do. And I think that's the biggest change from before, where you had a lot more rules to follow, pressure from investors, blah, blah, blah. For me personally, it's still what keeps me in this industry. Also, I mean, as you know, this industry is not always the easiest.
For sure. I think that's very interesting. It's certainly something I've noticed being in the business, is the number of people. I met a guy the other day from DT Swiss who rides an open bike. Everywhere I go and I meet people in the business, their bike at home is an open bike. And that led me to this sort of phrase I think I put in a review once upon a time: people who know ride open. Given how much sort of, I find it very hard to sort of balance, if I were an open employee, sort of wanting to sort of grow the company and be incredibly successful and well known, versus actually, I think when I'm riding my new Open, I think I will nod to other people on an open bike in a way I don't do if I'm riding a Specialized or a Trek or something. So I really see the dichotomy between wanting to be small and niche and sort of almost like an insider secret, obviously balanced against these incredibly big, successful companies you both held.
The problem isn't really that big, because there hardly are any open employees, so there's not. So there are no people sitting there going like, "Hey, we should grow this more."
Well, it's you two, right?
But it's we have a lot of people helping us, but I think, I mean, we're not trying to keep it small by, on purpose, or like we're not trying to be exclusive or anything like that, or our customers are not getting judged before we go like, are you worthy of an open? No, there's none of that. Like, to me, it's incredible how many people in the industry write open. That's for sure. And even people who work for some of our competitors, it's crazy. Of course, we never share those kind of things, but yeah, I'm a bit flabbergasted by that, to be honest. The second question of like, okay, how, why isn't open then in total bigger? I mean, we're big enough. We're happy with it. And but as Andy said, like, I mean, sponsorships, I mean, they do work. If you want to get beyond, that sort of core market and want to grow bigger, of course, it does help to have your bikes in the Tour de France or what have you, right? Even to sell a gravel bike, it helps to be in the Tour, even though those two have nothing to do with each other. And so, but we
presumably you'd like to see
do that, because then we end up spending all our time managing, all these kind of sponsorships and things like that. So we want to stay close to the product, and then the result is that some people are somewhat in the know, and then discover that brand, right? Also, because aside from not doing sponsorships, you also don't do any advertising, right? That'd be another way to grow. But I mean, through word of mouth, it got us to a size that's
that you're happy with,
enough, right? That we're happy with, yeah.
That's okay. So that's fine. You've achieved the mass you want to achieve.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that's the one thing I've really learned from this, is that when I started in business, with Cervelo, I came straight out of school. I didn't know anything, right? So the only thing I thought about a business, like the goal for a business is to grow. So we were growing, we were doubling every year, right? And it's just grow. And then, the first year we grew 50%. We were so disappointed. Like, we only grew 50%. Like, what's wrong, right? Like, this was like a disaster. And now I'm more of the view that, the company needs to grow to its correct size, right? And for every company that's different. And for open, that could still be quite a few bikes, but we don't want, as an organization or as a structure, we don't want to grow, right? So we want to have a small team of very competent people, which we do, right? We have fantastic people, sitting there with Andy in the office, and some people, all around the world. And with that team, if we can sell 1 million bikes, that's fine by me. But it's got to be in a way where the structure is so simple that can be achieved, which means it will never be 1 million bikes, but it's, as you say, it's big enough that we're happy with it.
Very good. Complete builds. You guys are offering a very nice SRAM Red Explore with the new Zip gravel wheels. Will you be doing complete packages with Shimano and Campag?
So we are really predominantly a frame set, or now whatever you want to call it, with the cockpit and stuff, maker, right? So that's what we focus on. Also, because our customer often wants to, they have their own ideas about how they want to build this bike up. So our goal is really that, and then we have the SRAM group sets, because some people just want to know, okay, what do we prefer, and that's the bike they want. So that's a category of customer as well. So we offer that, but I mean, we'll never have 5 or 6 different complete bikes or something like that. So it's more likely that we will have 1 or maybe 2 built options. Or that we do, as we've done, of course, in the past, that we do some limited batches of something, especially when a new product is launched by a wheel maker or a drivetrain maker, that we do a run of bikes with that. But in the end, we offer everything, because our open shops offer everything, right? So whether you want Campagnolo or Shimano or SRAM or anything, maybe more unique than that, even, then our dealers can put that together for our customers, no problem.
Very good. I like the fact that you guys, I mean, obviously you've gone UDH. I think the world needs more sort of standardization in bicycles, not more disparate systems. Have all these standards been, is it easy to design? Is it easier to design a bike now that there's been some stability compared to sort of the Wild West of 10 years ago?
No, I don't know. I mean, UDH is a good thing, I think. I mean, it's very clever on SRAM's part, because now they own that whole geometry back there to then not use the UDH hanger, of course. So I think that's been a very clever Trojan horse. And I mean, the rest, I'm not sure there are that many standards, or that there's that much convergence into a single standard in other
I
areas.
suppose not. What bottom brackets?
Maybe the
If we could
bottom
all
bracket a
combine
little
one.
bit. Also, maybe not for the right reasons. But so no, I think in the rest we're still stuck with lots of different standards. And in engineering school, they always teach you there should be no plural for the word standard. That's the whole idea of a standard, right? That there's one. But the bike industry obviously never got that memo.
Yeah, unique means one of a kind. Yeah, I'm a big fan of. I suppose I've never thought about it as a Trojan horse. I love the UDH. I think it's going to be fantastic for gravel bikes, for even road bikes going forward. Yes, bottom brackets. I hope there's going to be some form of convergence. You've gone with T47. How was that choice made? To give you some ease, I think this will be pretty much the last question.
No, it's okay. I mean, there as well, right? Of course, the industry went to press fit. The first press fit bikes were not good, right? I mean, like 15 years ago, 10 years ago, you had a lot of bottom bracket creaking issues and stuff like that. So then press fit obviously got a bad name, and certainly that execution deservedly got a bad name. But I think now we've come to the point where if you design the bike properly, produce it properly, press fit works really well. Like, we have so few issues with press fit, certainly a lot less than previous companies used to have with threaded bottom brackets. But of course, the market has, continued its dislike for press fit. And so, that market has really demanded to have threaded bottom brackets again, which in a way is, a lateral step, I think, at best. But I mean, you see some brands now go to threaded bottom brackets, and they had issues with creaking press fit, and now they have issues with creaking threaded bottom brackets, right? So the fact that you put a threaded bottom bracket in doesn't automatically solve all problems. The same requirements are still there to do it right. So, but the market certainly wants it, and T47 then makes a lot of sense given the bearing and crank standards that we have. It makes sense to go with 247 over any other dimensions of threaded bottom bracket.
Superb. Well, I haven't thrown a leg over it. I understand it's coming in the next week or two, so I'm very excited to put it all together. I've got a pile of parts waiting for a frame.
Very good. So, are you going to ride it first, or are you going to paint it first?
It gets painted first, and then do you think it's going to ride differently with a coat of paint? Would that have been a really good?
No, but I mean, some people can't wait, so they're first going to ride it for a couple months, and then they say, "I'll paint it later," and then 3 years later,
interesting.
3 years later, it's still unpainted. Of course, that's how that goes. But.
So I'm gonna have it shipped directly to the painter, and I have to say that does stick in my. You're right, it does stick in my throat a little bit because I sort of want to unbox it. But I'll have to live with that, and he can do everything, and then we'll go and film it being painted and then built up, and there's a lot of content coming out of this. Very good, gentlemen. It's been a great pleasure to talk to you. Is there anything you want to add? Anything you want to talk about the future of Open and tell people that you think isn't out there, or
future of Open, the future of awesome, as Andy always says.
Yeah, the future. No, what do I always say? I forgot. The future is wide. No, we make a step up now. The future is wide open. The only risk is that we lose our mind.
Okay, yes, on the way climbing up the ladder.
Exactly. We're at the edge of the abyss, but we made a giant leap forward.
Very good. I can't think of a better stroke worse note to end on.
Yeah,
that's verschrikkelijk. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
All right.
I'm looking forward to this. Thank you so much.
Enjoy the ride.
Thank you.
Bye.